For the first time this season, the Mets were swept in a series, and their starting pitching was pretty brutal. Is this a red flag for the Mets moving forward?
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, this was a brutal weekend for the New York Mets. They lose 3 games in a row for the second time this season. And for the first time this season, they got swept. If you go back a little over 25 days ago, 26 days ago, or maybe it was 27 days ago, the Mets had that first 3-game losing streak of the season when they lost the final game of their series against the Yankees and lost the first 2 of their series against the Red Sox. That's the only time this year, again, where they have lost 3 in a row. Never been swept, though. In between this sweep and then that 3-game losing streak before, there was a set of 25 days where the Mets either won or split every series they played. And I think it was all series victories except for the 4-gamer in LA against the Dodgers. They were playing great baseball. I don't look at this weekend getting swept and say, oh, the Mets are in trouble. But it is a really rough set of circumstances that the Mets are now facing because you get swept. The Phillies sweep the Blue Jays. So now you have a 5.5 game lead in the division. That evaporates to 2.5 games. And then you look at the road ahead. We've been talking about this 10-game stretch for weeks on this show. The Mets are about to head to Atlanta for a 3-game series that starts on Tuesday. Then over the weekend, next weekend, or this upcoming weekend, they'll be facing off against the Phillies. Then they come home 4 games against the Braves at Citi Field. All of a sudden, let's say the Phillies, who are playing the Marlins this week in Miami in a 4-game series, let's say they take care of business and they sweep the Marlins. And then let's say the Mets lose their series against the Braves. All of a sudden, the Phillies could be in first when these two teams meet. That is how quickly things can shift. And I do think that the Mets and Phillies will be going at it all year long. So this was a really rough spot where the Mets just could not get a single victory against a Rays team that is red hot. And you now look at this upcoming series, and we'll talk about it on tomorrow's show with the full series preview, but the Mets are lined up to go against Spencer Schwellenbach, Chris Sale, and Spencer Strider. And the Braves, while they've been bad this year, they're 12 games under 500 on the road. They're 4 games over at home. They are not slouches when they play in Atlanta. So I think this is a spot here where the Mets might fall back a little bit, a spot where we might get a little concerned as a fan base, wondering, well, are the Mets going to be able to stay atop this division? I think in the long run, they're going to be fine. I think it's going to be a race all year between the Mets and the Phillies. And all that matters is the Mets get hot at the right time. But this was a really bad weekend. And I almost equate it to a trap game in the NFL, where you're looking ahead to that division matchup, that division rival. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers come into town. They beat you when they're not supposed to. Granted, the Rays are a pretty good team right now. But still, the way the Mets had played this year at home, you thought, all right, they'll at least get a game. They'll probably still win the series. That's all we've seen the Mets do this year. But it didn't happen. And the starting pitching, a real culprit. We'll talk about it more in the next segment. But Griffin Canning gives up 6 runs in this game. Got knocked out in the 5th inning. Meanwhile, Shane Baz on the Rays side held the Mets scoreless into the 7th inning. The Mets had their chances offensively. They were 0 for 7 with runners in scoring position. First inning, Brandon Nimmo gets a base hit, steals second base ahead of Juan Soto and Pete Alonso. He gets stranded. 3rd inning was the Mets' real chance. They loaded the bases for Pete Alonso as Luis Angel Acuna got a base hit. Francisco Lindor drew a walk. Brandon Nimmo struck out, but then Juan Soto walked to load the bases for Pete with 2 outs. Pete works a full count, ends up striking out. Now, you could say, man, What a blown opportunity. Pete Alonso should have come through there. I can't believe the Mets lost this game and they didn't score a run in the final game of the series. Wow, how awful is that? But at the same time, look back and watch that at bat. Shane Baz beat Pete Alonso. 3-1 pitch, up and in, not a strike, but close enough. And Pete was geared up to swing, trying to do damage, and he swings through it. Then a fastball up and away that is dotted on the corner. Pete foul tips it. So, and it was a 99 mile per hour fastball, mind you, as well. I look at this weekend series, and yes, we're going to talk about where the Mets struggle with their pitching in the next segment. Absolutely. But let's also credit the Tampa Bay Rays, who since May 20th had the best record in baseball. They're 18-6. The Mets are tied with the Cubs and the Astros for the second best record in baseball since May 20th at 16-8. The Rays had great at-bats all series. They came through with runners in scoring position, and they were hitting the ball out of the yard. It was just a really good series for the Rays. They took advantage of the Mets' mistakes, and the Mets did not take advantage when they did get some mistakes from the Rays. And that's going to result in a bad series every time. The Yankees got swept over the weekend, too, by the Red Sox. We'll talk about the Red Sox in the final segment. Blockbuster trade, Rafael Devers heading to the Giants. But the Rays are now 3.5 games back. I mean, that's just what happens in these division races. Teams are going to fall back a little bit. And that's what we saw here. I'm not going to draw too many harsh conclusions about this series for the Mets. I'm not worried about the offense struggling because once again, those moments with runners in scoring position, they didn't come through. I'm going to credit a Rays team that's been throwing the ball really well. But when we look at this next 10-game stretch and you see a Mets rotation that has a suddenly struggling Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill, Clay Holmes, who's starting to be a little bit fatigued as he is he has more innings than he's ever pitched in an MLB season under his belt now. Yeah, you got David Peterson, but you got a lot of question marks. That's not even mentioning Paul Blackburn, who very much unproven at this stage of the season. So is there a cause for concern with this Mets rotation? We'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency, like a burst pipe. If the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait? No, you called the next one. That's why having a reliable business line is so important. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more, who's handling this? And the AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer again. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Mets listeners 20% off their first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnMLB. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Now, Griffin Canning had arguably the worst start of the season for the Mets on Sunday. If it wasn't his start, it was probably Tyler McGill's start on Saturday. There was a stat that had been going around for a while. The New York Mets this year have not seen any of the starting pitchers that opened the season in their rotation. So we're talking Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, Tyler McGill, or Griffin Canning. None of them had gone into a start and had given up more than 3 earned runs until Canning's on Sunday. Now, the one guy that did it earlier this season was Blade Tidwell, who gave up those 4 earned runs or whatever it was. It was more than 3. But that shows you how good the Mets have been all year. That even when some of these starters haven't given them length, have had some rough outings, they haven't had the brutal day. The day where the starting pitcher puts the team in a hole too big they can't climb out of it. But that's what happened in this series twice. And if you go through this game specifically focusing in on Canning, Walks killed him. Rough second inning where he gives up 3 runs. It all starts with 2 walks. Then a bunt where Brett Beatty makes a mistake, tries to go back to cover third, thinking that Griffin Canning, who is a great athlete, was going to get to that ball. Instead, gets past Canning. By the time Beatty gets to it, it's too late, and all the runners are safe. So bases loaded, nobody out. A force out brings in 1 run. A wild pitch brings in another. Then a base hit brings home the 3rd run of the inning. Only 1 ball left the infield in that inning, yet 3 runs scored. Then you have the 3rd inning. Another walk bites Canning, a 1-out walk. Then you have a base hit, which puts runners at 1st and 3rd. A ground ball where the Mets can't turn 2 results in another run. The base hit was the 1 ball in that inning that left the infield. Had Canning not issued a walk, maybe he doesn't give up another run, but the walk always comes back to bite you. 5th inning, he walks 2 or 3 batters that he faces. Then you have Max Kranick come in out of the bullpen. Kranick immediately gives up a double. Both of those runners come in to score, and that closes the book on Canning. Went 4 1/3, allowed 6 runs on 4 hits and 5 walks, only 2 strikeouts. It's a brutal start, sure. And the walks killed him. Doesn't mean that Griffin Canning can't be effective. We saw him, have a great start against the Dodgers this month. He still has it in there, but the last 5 starts have been pretty bad overall. You had the rain delay game against the Dodgers, gave up 3 runs in 2 2/3 innings pitched, walked 4. Then he goes up against the White Sox, did not make it past 3 innings, gave up 5 runs, only 3 of them earned, walked 4. Against the Dodgers, like I mentioned, lights out, 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts, no runs. Against the Nationals, gives up 4 runs on 7 hits, goes 5 1/3. And now you have this start, 6 earned runs, 4 1/3, 5 walks. Through his first 9 starts, Griffin Canning did not walk more than 3 batters in any start and walked 2 or less in 6 of 9 starts. His last 5 starts, 3 of them, he's issued 4 or more walks. So that's the issue. He's got to get back to attacking the zone. Once he does that, when he has his secondaries locked in and he's able to really work that changeup in the slider at the bottom part of the zone and just below it, getting the chase, getting the weak contact on the ground, all that good stuff, yeah, he'll be effective again. If he's unable to work low in the zone with those secondaries, if he starts to lose them and he starts to lose the strike zone altogether and he's issuing walks, he's going to get in a lot of trouble. You look at where Griffin Canning's at right now. He's sitting at a 3.80 ERA. I'd be thrilled if he finished the season with a 3.80 ERA. I never expected him to maintain the 2.47 ERA he had early on this year when he was rolling, or to even maintain the 3.3 ERA he had recently. I always thought it was going to come back down to earth just because he's not the type of pitcher that should be considered a frontline arm. And if you're pitching to a sub-3 ERA, you're a frontline arm, and that's just not Griffin Canning. Doesn't mean he can't hold his own in this rotation. Doesn't mean he can't get back and be in a good place. Doesn't mean he won't continue to eat innings for the Mets. I think all those things can still be true, and I do credit him for getting into the 5th inning compared to Tyler McGill that couldn't get that far on Saturday. But it doesn't change that this rotation has some question marks. I talked about McGill on yesterday's show. It's been a bad couple of months for him. He has great stuff, but he hasn't put it all together. Paul Blackburn is a massive wild card to open up this series against he's going to pitch the second game of the series against the Braves, but still, massive wild card. Was great in his 1 start, has been relatively bad out of the bullpen. That could just be a guy that's not comfortable pitching out of the pen, or it could be indicative of a guy that's always been a back-end starter who is going to get knocked around a little bit at times. Frankie Montas is struggling on rehab. Sean Manaea also struggling on rehab now. He had a rough start on Sunday. Allowed 4 runs and 2 1/3 innings pitched on 5 hits, hit a batter, gave up a home run, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. Rough outing. His pitch count continues to climb, which is good. So he's working his way back, and I still ultimately think that Manaea will be fine. I think when Kodai Senga comes back, he'll be good to go as well. I think down the stretch, those 2 guys, I believe the Mets will be able to count on them, and I feel great about David Peterson now, and of course, for that stretch run. Everything else, though, I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit concerned with where this rotation's at when you think about the 10 games they have ahead of them. Sean Manaea is not riding in on a white horse for this 10-game stretch. Neither is Kodai Senga. And honestly, I doubt Frankie Montas is. So if that's the case, it's this rotation that the Mets currently have, which at the beginning of spring training, if you told anyone this is the rotation, you'd think, man, the Mets are in trouble. because the group that they're going into war with against their division rivals, David Peterson, Paul Blackburn, Clay Holmes, Tyler McGill, and Griffin Canning. If you go back to February 1st, you could argue that was what? 4 through 8 on the depth chart? Yeah. I'm doing the math here. I'm like, is there 8 starting pitchers? Is there 9? But yeah, I mean, that's legitimately where it would be at. Now, David Pearson is throwing the ball great this year. So has Clay Holmes. Now, I'm a little bit worried about Holmes and the fact that he's showing some signs of fatigue, not with his results, but the fact that the Mets are limiting him to 85 pitches now, or at least did for this most recent start. That's a little concerning. But really, I'm more worried about how Paul Blackburn holds up, how McGill and Canning hold up. Because on the other side of it, you're going to see, again, this upcoming series, Spencer Schwellenbach, Chris Sale, and Spencer Strider, and you're going to see Sale and Strider again next week. You're going to see Zach Wheeler over the weekend. He won't be pitching in that 4-game set against the Marlins. It doesn't appear. So if that's the case, if that's where the Mets are at, it's going to be a tough stretch here of 6 of these 10 games are going to include really good pitchers on the other side, whereas the Mets, outside of David Peterson and Clay Holmes, have 3/5 of their rotation right now that I don't feel great about. So they're going to have to win in other ways. They're going to have to win with their bats. They're going to have to hold down leads with their bullpen. And they're going to have to get those 3 guys in this entire rotation to step up. Can Paul Blackburn go into Atlanta and hold down the Braves? Sure. Can Tyler McGill go into Philly and keep those bats at bay? Yeah, he can. But I think at this very moment, you are clearly missing the presence of Kodai Senga in this rotation. And in a lot of ways, for the first time, you're sort of missing those injured guys that are supposed to be a big part of the rotation as well. I think long-term, I'm not too concerned about the Mets rotation. I'm really not, because of the guys you have coming off the injured list. Because as I talked about in yesterday's show, you still have break glass in case of emergency option of Nolan McLean. But in the short term, this 10-game stretch coming up, am I worried about this Mets rotation? Absolutely I am. Because a rough 10-game stretch in the middle of June can mean a lot for where you're at in the standings. Come the All-Star break and just for the rest of the season. These are games the Mets have to have against tough division rivals. Granted, the Braves haven't been great this year, but like I mentioned earlier, at home they've been pretty good, and they got the good arms going. So we'll see how the whole thing shakes out for the Mets, but this was obviously a very frustrating weekend, and for the first time this season, I think you can have legitimate questions about this rotation. I'm just not looking at them as long-term questions. It's more short-term questions that I do think could result in the Mets having a little bit of a hole in this division at some point soon coming up. If this rotation continues to struggle and they have a bad 10 games, yeah, the Phillies can grab this lead back and hold it for a little bit. So hopefully some guys step up and this doesn't turn into an issue. But this weekend, it certainly looked like one. And hopefully that was just a credit to Ray's hitting and not a concerning first signal that the Mets are in trouble with their starting rotation. Close out the show, though, I want to talk about the biggest news in baseball. Rafael Devers goes to the Giants. Did the Mets miss an opportunity here? We'll talk about it in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service. We get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. Get a live graphic sent your phone each day so you know the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, there was a massive trade on Sunday. Rafael Devers, after hitting a clutch home run to help the Red Sox sweep the Yankees. What do? They pull off a trade and send Devers to the Giants, which is massive on a lot of different fronts. Now, this has not come out of nowhere. Rafael Devers was having problems with management. That was clear. In spring training, they asked him to maybe, be a DH. We're going to have Alex Bregman, who won the Gold Glove in the American League last year at third base. We're going to have him be our third baseman. You don't mind DHing for us, do you? I'm not moving off third base. You guys promised me I'd be the third baseman. Strike one. Strike two, Tristan Casas goes down. And they asked Rafael Devers, hey, why don't you go learn some first base? Take some reps over there. We could have you play first, and that DH spot's opened up because you have the top prospect in all of baseball in Roman Anthony that needs a spot to hit. Okay, you're not going to have an outfielder learn first. Why not a corner infielder learn first base? What's the problem there? Long term, that probably should be Rafael Devers' home on the diamond. No, I don't want to do that. I'm a DH now. You told me I'm a DH. I'm a DH. They had John Middleton, the owner, met with Devers. Apparently didn't go well. And so ultimately he ends up traded. What did the Giants have to give up to get him? Kyle Harrison, who I believe was in AAA and got optioned to AAA after the Red Sox picked him up in this deal. Left-handed starting pitcher, a lot of control. 4 years beyond this season. And I guess if he stays in AAA, it could still be 5 years if he doesn't get enough service time. So, yeah, a guy that gives them a potential starting pitcher for a long time, but a guy that has not fully established himself as a quality big league starter yet. 4.56 ERA, a little over 120 innings last year. This year, again, an identical 4.56 ERA. Okay, but certainly not a very good ERA that makes you think he's definitely going to be a fixture in the Red Sox rotation for years to come, but a guy that could be. Former top 100 prospect. So we'll see. Kyle Harrison could be a nice piece for the Red Sox here. Jordan Hicks is in the deal. Now, it's a big name, probably the biggest name in this trade outside of Devers, of course, but the biggest name that the Red Sox get back in the deal. But he was a net negative asset at this point. A ERA over 6 this season, owed $25 million over the next 2 years and 2 years beyond this season. Backloaded deal on a $44 million free agent contract, and he was supposed to be a starting pitcher early on last year. That transition went well down the stretch. It certainly didn't. Comes into this year, tries to be a starting pitcher again, does not work. Has the bad start to the season. They just moved him back to the bullpen. Now, for the Red Sox, I keep him in the bullpen. There is some upside there, but that's not a guy that moved the needle. It was part of the salary dump that the Red Sox were going for in this trade to get the Giants to take on the entirety of Rafael Devers' contract. And it was a contract well over $300 million. There's over $250 million left. He's in year 2 of the extension. When you look at what really went on in this trade, it was a salary dump, and the Giants offset it a little bit by getting a contract that they are loving not having on their books anymore. And then the Red Sox get a guy in Jordan Hicks that does have upside, but to make $12.5 million a season, that's closer money. So we'll see what Hicks is for the Red Sox, but they're not getting a lot there. Now, the prospects do give the Red Sox some upside. There is a pitching prospect, Jose Bayo, who's 20 years old, has had great numbers this year at the Arizona Complex League, but he's not a top 30 prospect even in the system right now for the Giants. Guy that has flashed some good stuff, but it's the Complex League, and it's his first season stateside. Then you have James Tibbs, who was drafted 13th overall out of Florida State last year. He is a good prospect, has good numbers in high A right now, but he's not a top 100 prospect yet. You compare him to Carson Bench if you're trying to, map out the trade that the Mets could have put together to get this deal done. I mean, Benj is a significantly better prospect. The Mets probably wouldn't have put him on the table in really any deal, but particularly this one, we were taking a big contract back. Tibbs is a corner guy, probably a first baseman, but he might still be able to hang in a corner outfield spot. A guy like Benj is a center fielder, so not as much prospect value in the corner guy compared to the guy that can play up the middle and has 5-tool potential. So when you look at the package, could the Mets have beat this offer? Absolutely. I look at Tyler McGill and Kyle Harrison, and I would say that Tyler McGill, because he has at least established himself as a big league starting pitcher, I think that's close to similar value. There's a little more control of Harrison, but McGill at this point has proven to be a better pitcher. Now, you look at the Jordan Hicks contract, though, and that's a net negative asset. So if I just combine those two pitchers, McGill's value alone is probably right there with the Harrison and Hicks part of this trade, because Hicks is a negative asset. And then you talk about the prospects. I don't know who the comp would be for Tibbs that the Mets would actually put on the table. I don't know if there is a really good one. I mean, I guess probably the best one would be Jacob Reimer, but even Reimer's a top 100 prospect according to us at Just Baseball compared to Tibbs, who wasn't on the list, and I don't remember him being on the Just Missed list either. But the Mets have a lot of pitching that they could have put into a deal. They could have put Tyler McGill and Blade Tidwell on the table. That moves a needle a little bit. Blade Tidwell, certainly a more projectable big league arm than a 20-year-old Jose Bayo. Tidwell, if nothing else, should be a pretty good relief pitcher with the stuff that he has. But he also has a chance to be a quality starting pitcher. That alone would move the needle, those two pieces. But here's the thing. The Mets had a piece they could have put in this trade that would have been a trump card. They could have put Mark Vientos in a deal to get Rafael Devers. Similar players, Devers and Vientos, as far as bat first third baseman. Vientos could have plugged into that Red Sox lineup immediately at the DH spot. Could have made a lot of sense for Boston. Now, they said, or it's been reported, that Devers was not shopped. But I also think that the fact that the Mets didn't pull off this trade and probably didn't express any interest is indicative of where they're at as a franchise and what they want to do moving forward. I don't think the Mets are big game hunting anymore. I don't think there's another superstar that they're looking to acquire. They have Juan Soto, they have Francisco Lindor, they have Brandon Nimmo under contract, and I think after the year that Pete Alonso has had, they'll look to keep Pete on a deal that's not going to be anywhere near what Vladdy got paid or what Devers already has. So if you look at it from that perspective, it makes sense that the Mets wouldn't make this trade. Because yes, they could have been the team that takes on a salary dump of epic proportions when you just look at the contract. Now, when you look at the production, you understand why the Giants did this trade and are probably thrilled about this trade. The Giants right now are a game back of the Dodgers in the NL West, and they don't give up anything that's helping them this season right now. Jordan Hicks had a bad year. Kyle Harrison was not even factoring into the mix anymore. And then Tibbs is not going to come up this year, and Bayo certainly wasn't coming up this year. Now, long term, maybe Tibbs is a prospect that you end up regretting dealing, but you have Rafael Devers for 9 years. And the Giants need a bat like Devers. They have Matt Chapman, Willie Adames as well that they brought in the offseason. I don't believe he's having the best of years, but that is your left side of the infield moving forward. Devers certainly isn't playing third base for the Giants, but he was never promised to play third base for the Giants. And he can just be their DH. That makes the Giants a scary team. It really does. The other thing about this trade is I think this might take Jarren Duran off the table. Because now, if the Red Sox are trying to stay in it, and it's going to be tough when you just give up your best bat by far. Rafael Devers leading the team in home runs, runs scored, and RBIs. Second highest OPS to only Alex Bregman, who's on the IL with a very serious, I think it's a quad injury, but whatever the lower leg muscle it is that's hurt, he's out for a while. So the Red Sox might fall out of this race, and then theoretically, they could put Duran on the table just to see what they'd get, but it does put them in a power position as far as their leverage on trading Duran, because now they can just look at their future and say, all right, well, we got Ceddanne Rafaela that can be our starting center fielder, or it can be sort of a fourth outfielder that will play center field whenever, but it is that high floor with the glove, but certainly a kind of question mark with the bat player. You have Wilyer Abreu, who looks like an all-around above average right fielder. You got Jared Duran and left. You got Roman Anthony that could play any of those spots if you want to, or he can just be your DH and can rake. I mean, they have the ability now with their roster to fit all the pieces. Now, Roman Anthony doesn't need to be a DH. He could be your starting left fielder. And they still could move Duran, but this could have been the one big move for the Red Sox, getting a guy that they felt like was a problem off the books. And then they could be looking to reinvest in the offseason and really go for it again in 2026. So I don't know if this would make the Red Sox a full-blown seller. I think they're going to still try to hang in this wild card race, but it was a pretty wild trade and one that I can see Mets fans having some FOMO about, where you're thinking, man, that's all it took to get Rafael Devers. You could have had Rafael Devers plugged into this lineup where it could have been Francisco Lindor, Rafael Devers, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, if you want to go that way, 1 through 4, with Brandon Nimmo batting 5th, and you just go down the line how deep that lineup looks. I mean, if you could have had a 1 through 4, Lindor, Devers, Soto, and Alonso, it's hard not to think about that and dream about what it could have been. But I think it shows you where the Mets are at, where they don't feel like they have to acquire a guy like that. They don't probably want to get another DH when Juan Soto has plenty of DH risk. If you keep Pete Alonso, he does as well. And you don't necessarily want to clog a DH spot for 9 years or 8 years after this season. But I understand if you're a Mets fan and the first thing you thought when you saw that trade package was, man, the Mets should have gotten in on that. Can't do anything about it now. We'll see where things go and what the ripple effects of this trade are on all teams at the deadline. Will the Red Sox be sellers? Will the Giants keep on buying? Will the Giants be a team the Mets grow to fear in the National League? A lot can come from this, but definitely a wild trade to cap off the week here, and kind of gets us primed a little bit for what is an exciting time ahead. I'll be with you every single day as always. Tomorrow's show, full series preview, Mets versus Braves, should be a fun one. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. After your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out Locked On MLB Game Night, which will take you around all of the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts. And it is available again on the Locked On MLB podcast feed and the Locked On MLB YouTube channel.